Have you ever read the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie? If not, it begins this way. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And when he's finished, he'll ask, or when he's drinking the milk, he'll probably ask for a straw. And when he's finished, he'll ask you for a napkin. Then he'll want to look in a mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. And the book goes on and on and on with more things the mouse will want or need as a result of giving the mouse a cookie. Well, I confess that's how I felt this week as I dug into the book of Esther, a book I thought I knew. Each time I uncovered something new, I realized that I likely needed to talk about something else first before I got to the other thing. It was really an if you give a mouse a cookie week for me. So I decided, as a result, that the best place for us all to begin is here, the Bible. Yeah, a light topic, I know, and simple one to cover in a single Sunday morning, right? So settle in. No, I'm just kidding. But I thought a couple of reminders might be in order before we enter our text. This is not one book. This is a collection, a library of various books from all kinds of lands with dozens of authors, multiple worldviews and theologies written over a span of some 1,500 to 2,000 years. It is not univocal. And what that means is it doesn't speak with one voice. And this multivocality, this multitude of voices, is one of the most wonderful parts of this collection. We get to hear from multiple perspectives and even understandings of God and God's relationship with humanity. And this allows the reader to see things from literally dozens of perspectives. Within that collection, there are a wide variety of literary genres, and we've talked about this before. There is poetry and prose, historic narrative and wisdom literature, prophecy and letters, gospels and myths, and more. And it's helpful to know the genre of a text as one reads in order to more fully understand some of the goals of the author. And some of the genres are really easy to detect, others not so much, and still others cause wide and sometimes contentious disagreement even among scholars. So with all of that as a backdrop, we come to today's second lesson. It is a unique text that is only represented one time in the entirety of the 3-year cycle of the lectionary. It's a story that isn't read much and, frankly, is often ignored, perhaps because it doesn't mention God even once in the entire text, or maybe because the hero is a woman. That couldn't be true, right? I digress. Most people within Christian and Jewish circles do know something of the story. They at least know the hero's name, Esther. Esther is an unexpected tale with unexpected characters and an unexpected plot twist or two or a dozen. It reads much like an episode of the Game of Thrones. And the story is told to children, much like we would tell them the story of Cinderella. We don't know much, if anything, about the author. We can discern some things about its historic setting, but even that is a little bit fuzzy on the edges. And its genre is historic fiction, or maybe more appropriately, an ancient Jewish novella. Think, actually, telenovela. Its main characters, outside of the king, are likely not actual historic figures. Each may be a compilation of several different people, or they might have been made up entirely. The text was written sometime following the Babylonian captivity and the Persian overthrow of the Babylonian Empire. And depending on when one dates the text, the temple in Jerusalem, way far away from where this book was written, was either in the process of being rebuilt or had already been rebuilt. This text was written by and for Jews who were a part of what is called the diaspora, or the scattering. And these people, a certain segment of them, continued to live and some flourish in the land of Persia. One of its primary purposes seems to be to justify the establishment of this celebration called Purim. That is one of the most unique festivals on the Jewish calendar. It is a fun and outlandish holiday and celebration, complete with costumes and noisemakers, presents, and often hysterical representations of the story. And it's celebrated by Jews all over the world. This uniquely Jewish story is also a type of critique of powers, kings, kingdoms, patriarchy, and more. I told you, if you give a mouse a cookie, he will need to dig into the historic and literary setting of the text. So now, to the story itself. It all began with a bumbling king whose name is Ahasuerus, more commonly known as Xerxes. The king threw a party to show off his riches, as kings are prone to do. And the attendees had a little bit more than too much to drink, as partygoers might do. The king demanded that his wife, known as Vashti, make an appearance to perform before the crowd. She denied the request, and as patriarchy and misogyny are known to do, she was punished, actually banished from the kingdom for her autonomy and for her act of self-reliance. How dare she? And on the advice of his aides, the king issued a royal decree, and it was sent out to the entire kingdom and sealed with the king's seal, that all women in the entire kingdom were supposed to honor their husbands. Can you imagine such a decree? No one would ever allow that to happen, right? Once the king felt lonely again, there was a search for a new queen throughout the entire kingdom. Enter Mordecai, a Jewish man of the tribe of Benjamin who lived in the citadel of Susa. He had taken a cousin under his care, and we know her as Esther, but her given name was Hadassah. And to honor her, we're going to actually use her given name throughout the sermon this morning. Hadassah was taken to the palace along with young women from all over the kingdom, and eventually she became queen. Hadassah, a Jewish woman from the tiniest of territories in Persia, now the queen? What an unlikely tale. Yet, somehow, vaguely familiar. And there's much more to that part of the story that we're not going to unfold today, including some rather disturbing and lurid details that, again, reveal the ugly underbelly of a world characterized by power, control, and heteropatriarchy. In many ways, this entire story is a satiric commentary about such things and their capacity for destruction. The story goes on. In order to protect herself and her kindred at the request of her cousin Mordecai, Hadassah, Esther, kept her Jewish lineage a secret. It's one of the reasons her name was changed. However, through an unfolding of a series of events and an evil plot by the sinister Haman, now if you were at the celebration of Purim, at the mention of his name, you would boo and hiss. Yeah. Haman. Yeah, there you go. At his evil plot, the lives of all of the Jews throughout the entire kingdom were at risk. Haman, there you go, all right, was the king's vizier and prime minister, and he encouraged the king to issue yet another decree, this time for the elimination of all Jews. And they cast lots, Purim, to set the month and the day for their destruction, the 13th day of the 12th month. At this, Mordecai once again had a word for his cousin, Hadassah, the queen. No, not Hadassah, Haman, yeah. So this message came through a messenger, and he pleaded with her to go to the king on behalf of all of the people. And she told him, everyone in the kingdom knows that if any man or woman approaches the king in the inner court of the palace without being called, they are to be put to death. Their life is spared only if the king holds out the golden scepter. She, the queen, had not been invited into the king's presence for some 30 days. In reply, Mordecai sent this message. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. Who knows, he said. Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. At this, Hadassah, Esther, courageously replied, I will go to the king, though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Now, resolute and creatively, she hatched a plan and visited King Ahasuerus, Xerxes, unannounced, risking her own well-being, her life. Her audience was granted and her life was spared, and Queen Hadassah invited the king and his right-hand man, Haman, yeah, there you go, to a banquet in their honor. Who doesn't like a banquet? Then comes our text for this morning. How do you like that? In Esther chapter 7, we read, So the king and Haman went into the feast with the queen. On the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king again said to Esther, What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half of my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have won your favor, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given to me. That is my petition. And the lives of my people, that is my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have held my peace. But no enemy can compensate for this damage to the king. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, Who is he and where is he who has presumed to do this? Esther pointed right over at the table and said, A foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance to the king, said, Look, the very gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, stands at Haman's house, 50 cubits high. And the king said, Hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. then the anger of the king abated. Then in chapter 9 we read, Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, enjoining them that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and also the 15th day of the same month, year by year, as the days on which the Jews gained relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another and presents to the poor. So goes the story of Queen Esther, Hadassah, the Jewish young woman who saved her people from certain destruction. So, what is one to make of such an unlikely tale? Why would a story like this be included in the writings of this collection? Especially since God is not mentioned even once. I think we have much to learn from the story of Hadassah. The story reveals that echoes throughout the entire corpus of the Bible, actually. The ways of the divine, the one who stands on the side of the marginalized, the forgotten, the cast aside, the persecuted, the neglected, the systematically oppressed, the threatened, the one who goes by many names. Those ways can be delayed and even diverted, but those ways will never be thwarted, no matter how dismal the circumstances may seem, even when all seems lost. This is true because in every set of circumstances, there are those who rise up, people who understand the assignment. There are those whose names we may never know, or whose stories are ignored or forgotten, people of everyday courage who act with everyday determined heroism in their part of the world. These are the ones who really see people, who call others by name, who exhibit kindness, who listen, who shine light even in the tiniest corners, who move with mercy and grace, who seek the reflection of love everywhere they go, people who risk, people who do not need to be seen, but who aren't afraid of their echo being noticed. The story of Esther, Hadassah, reminds us that one need not be queen to impact the world. One is only called to respond. Each one of us, no matter our age, our station, our location, each one of us is here with specific things that only we can uniquely do. As Hadassah was reminded, who knows? Perhaps you have come for just such a time as this. Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfield writes, this text is an invitation. Consider the possibility that you are here for a purpose. Consider the possibility that there is something bigger and more important than your fear. Consider the possibility that you have more power than you imagine. Consider the possibility that it is up to us to act out of love and responsibility for each other in order to make room for God's presence in this world. To make room for God's presence in this world. This is your time. This is your moment. So go on. Write the note. Make the call. Visit the neighbor. Bake the cake and deliver it to your friend. show up at the rally, sign the petition, give them a ride, devote an hour of your time. There's no way for you to know, but maybe your one act will tip the scales. In the Mishnah are these words: you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Your work matters. Your investment matters. Your time matters. Your being matters. Your life matters. You are an important part of the story. Who knows the impact your chapter will make? You are here for this moment in time, and your unexpected tale matters. To God be the glory. Amen.